All right, everyone. I am a little bit under the weather. I think I caught a stomach bug. I had trouble sleeping last night too because of it. I had like cramps. My stomach was sore. I'm feeling nauseous, and I'm like, what the fuck? Rutland is a main hub for people traveling around this time of year. Especially they come to go skiing on the mountain and shit. The population of Rutland's like an extra few thousand of people at any given time, so a lot of sickness makes its way through. Unfortunately, it's time for number one year's end video, the top 5 losers of 2018. At least as far as I see it, I'm sure lists will vary if we ask different people. Number 5, PETA. Specifically for a tweet that made I think less than a week ago. Link in the description to this tweet. By the way, only mildly ratioed. Actually, PETA has a large and very vicious fan base. Not necessarily always vicious, but some weird beliefs, maybe lots of activism or craftivism, depending on what you think about PETA. They were basically trying to control language. We're saying, oh, don't say be the guinea pig, say be the test tube, speciesist, bastard, basically, and it was very funny. It did get ratioed, but only a little bit again because of their large families. I think people thought it was funny more than it was negative, and then so they spread it around, and people are liking it because it's funny, basically. It's almost like comedy without intending to be. Number 4, Emmanuel Macron. I think he definitely deserves to be on that list. Maybe on some it'd be number 1. He's basically overseeing the dissolution of his own government. He so far has refused to step down. He has blamed thuggery, the far right in general, Nazis, Russian influence, and everybody but himself for the problem that's currently happening in France, which is that because he failed to properly address the fuel tax and price situation, what would have been a more limited protest has now spiraled out of his control, and for weeks you've had burning cars and people throwing rocks, and they're still going now. In fact, to the point where I think having a couple of nations temporarily halted the ability of online vendors to even ship yellow vests because they're afraid of that. I'm pretty sure somebody sent me a story a couple days ago of that. I can't remember exactly who. Emmanuel Macron, whose approval is below 20%, he's approaching Dilma Rousseff levels. He might have to resign. Even if that happens, though, it's not entirely clear where things go from there because the demands of some of the Yellow Jacket protesters, some of them, are way out to far left economically. Supposedly these are far right Nazi individuals, but some of the demands that have been released by some of these groups actually is like universal welfare, increases in welfare and pensions and stuff like that. Not necessarily what you would generally associate with the right. I think the only possible far right thing that's included with them is really maybe a more nativistic border control. But that's something that's taking hold left, right, and center in Europe as people realize it's a bad idea to have full free movement because then other countries might disagree with you on who should be part of that free movement, and then you're fucked. That's the whole point. Number 3, Glenn Beck. Because he has made, in a single year, he managed to have to downsize the Blaze. It became insolvent. Pretty sure he bailed out his own company. I think he was looking for the Blaze to be bought out by Ben Shapiro's people, if I remember correctly. What is it, The Wire or something? And at the last minute they balked, and so Glenn, I guess, decided, well, I'll just buy another media order with a pre-established audience. I'll drop some of my own money and infuse them together. Then we have a larger audience and a brand that will be more vibrant that I can hook the Blaze to, and then it'll become profitable. The problem is that Michelle Malkin immediately left, or was fired, depending on who you ask, not sure. Then Gavin was fired. Well, there go 2 of the main people that were part of your brand, and then Crowder is spending every day scratching his head, wondering if he wants to just cancel his contract or something. That would really be a funny thing to see. Only CRTV before, maybe interesting to watch. Now it's like, well, Glenn Beck owns it. It's not. Pretty soon there'll be mandatory chalkboards in every video. It'll be very interesting to see. Very entertaining. Number 2 is Patreon, because so far, it's like I'm going to be making a video today. Gavin McInnes, of course, had been banned. A couple days later, YouTube, reinstated him. They realized that the claims against him were false. They're like, well, his account's back. You've seen some examples where tech firms have pulled back on wrongful decisions. Patreon is remarkably resilient with regards to not wanting to do that. They have suffered massive attrition. I can't even fathom the amount of money that they've lost per month in the scope of only, what is it now, 4 or 5 days. Sargon continues to beat them over the head on this issue. Others do as well. And they've managed to destroy their brand's reputation among a critical group of people that are very active in making content, gaining money, giving money. A lot of money moving around means Patreon is getting a cut of that and making a lot of money off people like Sargon or like Computing Forever or like myself. Patreon makes a large chunk of change on that. That chunk of change is now dwindling. And now you've got a situation where you've got people looking into high-risk payment processes, the kind that work with porn sites, in order to create alternative platforms. That's considerably more resilient than saying, oh, we'll slap PayPal on it. Certainly they won't care. No, we're talking like some bank in Mozambique might be making the payment processing. It would be very, very funny. It probably is. Unfortunately, people have been pushed in that direction. Because here you've got a situation where Jack Conte from Patreon hasn't weighed in, refuses to address the issue that a creator has been kicked off his platform even though he did not breach the TOS according to a literal interpretation of the TOS. It's simply not there. And so if you don't have it in your terms of service, you shouldn't be kicking someone off. Oh yeah, but our terms of service is a little bit different from what's actually written there. That's not what terms of service are supposed to mean. They're supposed to be very explicit so that something like this doesn't happen where other people begin fleeing your platform. It goes beyond the issue of Sargon got kicked off. Now it's beginning to affect other creators. When their bottom line ends up diminishing because of that, they start thinking about alternatives too. It's a ripple effect. And it can happen very fast. It could be go MySpace mode. By the way, that would be very inconvenient. A lot of people still rely on it, including people that don't know anything about alt tech because they haven't been pushed to that limit. Their content is, G-rated or whatever. It's totally acceptable. All of a sudden, they start making less money. They're like, what the hell is happening? Apparently, someone is claiming that Patreon sent them an email out of the blue to reassure them about their own content being allowed. I saw this on Twitter the other day. So yeah, Patreon definitely takes the number 2 slot. But number 1... ultimate loser of 2018, the blue wave. Now, this isn't a person or a thing, obviously. It's more of an idea. The idea was that the Democrats in the United States were supposed to play Empire Strikes Back and crush the Republicans, retake the House and Senate, then they'd begin to immediately to try to impeach Trump, and everything would be hunky-dory, and there'd be liberalism forever, and guns would be banned, and there'd be twice as much welfare, and we'd have free healthcare and free ice cream, and Bernie Sanders' statue on Mount Rushmore and shit. That didn't happen. They managed to retake the House. They lost several seats in the Senate, and they look weaker than they did before. They can't get anything accomplished. And all of the legacy media hacks that were sitting there saying there's going to be a blue wave, there's going to be a blue wave, contributed to the demoralization now of the Democratic lay people and the viciousness with which they're attacking even their own party, trying to get things accomplished, because you've got split power and they can't accomplish the things that they've promised people. They promised people the moon on a stick, but that was requisite on them taking the Senate. They actually believed the pundits when they said, yeah, don't worry, they've got all of these races, they'll probably have like 55 Senate seats, and they actually believed that. Whoops, that was a big tactical error, because the only way they even retook some of those House seats is by whipping up a bunch of poor and younger voters into a frenzy to be craptivistic and go knock on doors and ramble online to one another and to say, oh, fucking get out and vote, Orange man bad. The problem is now they can't actually fulfill those promises. If anything, Trump is going to get his wall before they get any of these things. He's probably going to be able to get the Senate on board. It's probably going to happen. Pelosi will try to stonewall. Her own party might defect. That would look a little bit odd. And then the further left would attack the DNC. They already hate Trump enough, but I mean, they haven't been attacking the Democratic Party quite as much. I can see that potentially changing depending on what happens there. So those are the 5 biggest losers of 2018. Quite a list. There are some other runner-ups, of course. Twitter has done some stupid things lately. Social media in general could be in general on that list, other than YouTube, which is still growing. You can look at some of the end-year charts. A lot of these firms have begun to lose users and hemorrhage money. Twitter is shrinking. Facebook is shrinking. Patreon is quite clearly shrinking. Snapchat's basically dead in the water. I wouldn't be surprised if Instagram begins shrinking at some point. So the lamestream, well, not lamestream, the legacy tech firms, the ones that are engaged in censorship, they're not innovating, or they innovate in the wrong way in some cases. They're beginning to peak out. There's no more user base for them to actually grow on. That is, they can't grow any bigger, and then competitors begin to rise up in their in their new technological state, they're beginning to challenge them. Just like Gab is now a viable alternative to Twitter. Minds is a viable Facebook alternative. BitChute is a viable YouTube alternative. You've got Steemit, which is sort of a blog function, now has streaming and standalone video. You've got all sorts of innovations happening now. And so there are some other runner-ups too, but I think that's probably enough. That's about all. Peace out.